Assalamu alaikum and hi. In this video, I'm going to go through with you part of the solutions for week 8, part 1 Java arrays, where in this specific topic, we have learned about single dimensional array, two-dimensional array, and how to create and also change the element within that array. We have also looked into how to use the for loop to access each of the elements within this array, whether it is a single dimensional or two-dimensional arrays, where if it is a two-dimensional array, we will need to use a nested for loops. So for the first questions, below is a code snippet containing 6 arrows. Please identify these arrows. And what I'm going to do, as usual, will be to copy this and paste it in the code cell and going to run through it bit by bit. So now if we go through this for the first line, it is how we declare two-dimensional arrays. But if you notice here, these should not be metrics. This should be the data type. So I need to change it to integer. And this should be the first arrow. Double value equal to 1. If you notice here, we are going to insert the value into our two-dimensional arrays. So because our two-dimensional array is with the data type integer, so our value need to be integer as well. And that will be our second arrow. Now for the looping here, obviously we are using a nested for loop here. And that will be the outer loop, and this will be the inner loop. But if you look into the operator here, this is less than or equal, which is not accurate because we know that there are only total 9 elements, but each row and each column we have 3 elements. So here need to be less than, okay, so that is 0, 1, 2, right? Because if you do less than or equal, then you will have 4 elements, okay? That will be our third arrow. Okay, moving on to, you have this matrix Ji, okay? Now, if we look back into the notes, then you know that we should start with I first, which is the outer loop, then only we go for J, okay? So that will be our fourth arrow, okay? Here, system.out_print line matrix. This is a string that I want to print. So for string, we know that it's just a quick revisions here where we need to have the double quotations. This is my fifth arrow, okay? And I have a for loop here, but this is not the conventional for loops where I have for integer I equal to 0, I less than 3, I plus plus. I'm using a for each loop here. And within my matrix here, I should point to the array. So if this is an array, so what I need to do will be, I need to add in the square brackets to indicate that this is actually the array that is coming from this matrix. And then moving on in the inner loops, then only I loop within the array, okay? So this row is actually an array here. So if it is an array, then I will need to have that square brackets. And that will be my sixth arrow, okay? So if I'm going to run this code, I would then get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Move on to question 2. Write a Java programs to read 5 numbers using the scanner class, compute their average, and determine how many numbers are above this average. So you must use array for this programming task. The numbers entered may include decimal points, okay? It's kind of like giving us a hint that if the numbers entered may include decimal points means we need to use either double or float. But as I said, always we need to tackle tasks bit by bit. So let's start by having the scanner class first, because we need to have a program that read 5 numbers and using the scanner class here, okay? So what I do is I'm going to import my scanner class .utility.scanner. And then I'm going to create my scanner object here. My object is equal to new system scanner, right? System.in, okay? Moving on, I'm going to read 5 numbers. To simplify, I will only read 1 number first. So integer, shouldn't be integer, right? It should be double, okay? Because it says here may include decimal points. So double, let's have a name for my variables. Let's say num is equal to, I'm going to use my object here, and then next double, okay. Just going to print this system.out.println and num, okay. So for this, I'm just reading one number, okay. I'm just reading one number. So let's say it's 2.1. So of course I get 2.1 here. But what we need is actually, we need to read 5 numbers. What we can do is we can actually initialize an array with a specific length where we say double, okay. My num list will be equal to new double, okay, and I specify the length, which is 5. Okay. Now I've created an array here with the specific length of 5. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put each of the user input into these lists here, okay? I'm going to put the input from the user into these lists. So how I'm going to do this, I'm going to have a for loop. So for integer I equal to 0, I less than, I can do my num list dot length, okay, which is the length of my array, and I plus plus. I'm going to go open brace and close it here. Now, here I need to do some modifications, because when I do my object.nextDouble, I'm reading the user input, but previously I'm just using num, which is just a variable. So now I need to insert that into an array. So I need to follow the array which I've created. So I will do my num list I, okay, which means that if it's my num list 0, then the first element, my num list 1, the second element. To test this, I'm going to create another loop here, integer j, j less than, so going to be the same. So I'm going to copy and paste this. I think that will be easier. Now here, j less than j plus plus, okay. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to print out the elements. So I do system.println my num list j, okay, which is supposed to print each of the elements entered by the user. Now let's run this. Okay, so I have, let's say 2.1, 3.2, 4.5, 6.1, 7.2. Okay, so you can see here, I input the numbers and then it prints the numbers. This is from the second loop. The numbers that you see here is actually from the second loop. Okay, so basically I've done the first part where I read 5 numbers using the scanner class. I use array for this programming task. Now I will need to compute the average and determine how many numbers are above this average. Okay, so we know that in order for us to calculate the average, we first need to find the total, right? So in order for us to find the total, we can do double total equal to 0. We initialize a variable total as 0. And then within the loop here, I do total plus equal my num list I, okay, where I find the total here. I add each of the elements into the total as I loop through the list. Okay, so plus equal, we know that plus equal here means total is equal to total plus my num list I. Okay, now let's test on this. We do system.out.println. I'm just going to print the total. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to put in the numbers again. So I just put in 5 5s here. So you can see the total here, 25, right? It's still double, even I put in 5 here, but because the data type is double, so I have the decimal points here. Okay. So now we have the total, we can easily calculate the average, where I can just say double average is equal to my total divided by, of course you can do divided by 5, but I prefer to do it this way, where I do divided by my num list dot length, which is also 5. Okay, now we can print out the average, which is this one. And I'm going to run it again, okay, to make sure that this is correct before I move on to the next step. So by right, the total is 5, so the average should be, well, the total is 25, the average should be 5, which is this one, okay. Now I have already got the average here. Okay, so I'm done with this compute the average and determine how many numbers are above this average. So we need to kind of like put in a conditional statement to check whether each of these numbers are above the average. What I can do here is I'm going to add a if statement here. So I will say if my num list j, okay, I'm going to put it here, is greater, because here it says how many numbers are above this average. So above, we need to use a greater than, okay, not greater or equal. So greater than the average, okay. So I need to do something here, but what is this? This will be a counter. We say it's a counter. So I'm going to declare a new variables here, integer, counter equal to 0, okay. And if there is any number that is above the average, as you can see here within this if statement, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do counter plus plus, okay? Which means if I found out a number which is above the average, I will add 1, means I'm count that as 1, so that I can determine how many numbers within that array is actually above the average. Okay. And of course, finally, I will need to print the counter, right? Print the counter. Okay. Well, in fact, I'm going to put all of these at the very end. Okay. So I have the total, I have the average, and I have the counter. And I'm going to remove this system.out.println because I don't want to complicate things. Now, if I run this again, let's say I'm going to put in some other numbers, 5, 7, 8, 2, 5, let's say, okay. So here I have 5, 7, 8, 2, 5. The average, well, the total first is 27. The average is 5.4. And I know that there are two numbers, if you can see here, two numbers, which is 7 and 8 that are greater than the average, right? So that's what we have here. We're using a 2 for loop. The first for loop is for us to ask for the user input and put that within an array, and at the same time we calculate the total. As for the second for loop is for us to loop through the elements and check whether each of these elements are above the average or not. Now let's move on to question 3 here. It says, write a Java program to find the number of even and odd integers in a given array of integer. So you have been given an array here, my list, and you have 1, 2, 5, 5, 8, 9, 7, and 10. So here we say for integer I is equal to 0, I is less than, as usual, my list.length, okay? And I plus plus, I'm going to open and close the brackets. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a system.out.println to make sure that I can actually access each of the elements. Okay. Now, if I run this, I should be able to see 1, 2, 5, 5, 8, 9, 7, 10. Okay. So done with this one. Now I'm going to put in some what we call that the conditional statements to determine whether a given number is odd or even. Okay, so what I can do is I can of course use modulus. So I will say, for example, if my list I modulus 2 is equal to 0, then that number should be even, right? We have learned that previously. So I'll just do system.out.println. This is an even number, okay. And I put else, okay, anything other than that will be, of course, odd. Okay, so system.out.println, this is an odd number, okay. Well, if I write something like this, I might have problems to check whether my output is correct or not. So what I need to do here is I would like to do a string concatenations here. So I do my list I, okay, then concatenate, okay, and then maybe equal here. This is n. All right. Just gonna copy on this one, paste it here. So now if I run that, I will see, okay, 1 is an odd, 2 is an even, 5 is odd, 8 is even, 9 is odd, 7 is odd, 10 is even. So this code works. But if we look back into the program here, it says I want to find the number of evens and odd integer. So given the array here, how many odd number do we have? So it will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 5 odd numbers and 1, 2, 3, right? 3 even numbers. Okay. So as usual, in order for us to do a counting here, we will need to create a counter, right? To create a counter to do that. So what we can do here is we're going to create 2 counter because we need a counter to count the odd numbers and we need another counter to count the even. Okay. So here I do integer even counter is equal to 0, integer odd counter is equal to 0 as well. So you can expect where I'm going to put this will be under this, right? Because if this is an even numbers, I'm going to do even counter plus plus, else I'm going to do odd counter plus plus, right? Now what I'm going to do is I just need to print it here, system.out.println. Well, for simplicity, I'll just straight away print the counter. Ideally, you should put in some strings to indicate which one is even and which one is odd, right? Okay, so my first one is even, my second one is odd here. Now, if I'm going to run this, I should be able to see, okay, my even counter, as you can see, is 3. So I have 3 even numbers, and my odd counter here, it prints 5, which means I have 5 odd numbers, okay? So what we do is simple, is just to add a counter here to determine whether or to count how many numbers do we have based on a specific conditions. Now let's try one more question. Question 4, write a Java programs to find the common elements between 2 arrays of integer. So we want to find which are the common elements within this integer. Of course, if we look into this, then we know that, okay, 1 and 1, this is a common one. 2 is not, because 2 is in array 1 but not in array 2. 5 is not, because 5 is in array 1 but not in array 2. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we can actually approach these tasks using a nested for loop. Okay, right, so as a start, I will need to do a for loop here for integer I equal to 0. Okay, I less than array 1 dot length. Okay, because I'm going to loop through each of the elements, and then I plus plus. Okay, open and close it. Now what I can do is I'm going to print each of the elements. Okay, where I do array 1 I. All right. Okay. Here, close it. I'm going to run this. There's a semicolon miss. Okay, this should be a semicolon. Okay, run this. So I get 1, 2 up until 10. Right, in order for me to find the common elements, what I need to do is for each of these, let's say for 1 here, I will need to check with the second array, array 2, whether 1 is within this second array, this array, okay? That's why I say we need to use a nested for loop. So what I do here is I create another inner loop here. I say integer j is equal to 0, okay? J is less than array 2, because now I need to loop through the second array here, and j plus plus, okay? Open and close, right? Now I will print my second array here for you to understand what is actually going on if I do something like this. So here I do For each of the first element, I have an inner loops where I'm going to print each of the elements within the second array. So if I run this, you'll see a long list of numbers here. Okay, you'll see a very long list of numbers here. So of course, 1 here, you have 1, and then for each of that, you will have that 1 as well. Well, this should be J, right? This shouldn't be I. So J here, okay. So this is the correct output. So you have 1 here, which is the first index, as you can see, 1 here. Then we have all the elements of the second array, 1 up until what? Up until 0, okay? 1 up until 0. And then we move on to the second elements, 2. For 2, I am going to loop through each of the elements in array 2 as well, okay? Array 2. Okay, and then I move on up until the very end, so you can see a very long list of numbers. But what we want to do here is not to just print all this number. What we want to do is we want to find a common element. So how we can do that is we can say if, right? If array I, okay, if array I is equal to array 2j, okay, right? So I will say this will be the common element. So I just write common elements, just 1, right? Okay. So here you can see if array I, my I will always be 0 when I'm loop through this before I finish the loop here. Okay. So my I will be equal to 0, okay, which is the same elements here. So I'm compare these very same elements with all of the elements within array 2, because here my j is increments, right? So common elements here will be equal to, I'm going to do a string concatenations here, array I, okay? Well, because here we are not required to do any counter. So as long as once I find a common elements in array 2, which is the same as array 1, then basically I can do a break, okay? Which will then help me to come out from the inner for loop. So I break here. Of course, once I break, then I will go back to the outer loop. So now let's run this, but I'm just gonna comment it out, the system.out.println line, so that we can focus our output on the common elements, okay? So here I have array, okay? So this should be array 1, right? Okay, array 1, run it again. Well, there's still another arrow here, okay? Well, here I'll just write array 1, okay? Array 1. Okay, so common elements 1 and 7, is that correct? So I have 1, which is the common elements, 2 is not, 5 is not, 8 is not, 9 is not, 7, yes, I have 7, 7, and I have 10. So yeah, that's the correct result where I have 2 common elements. And what are this number? It is 1 and also 7. So if you notice here, I'm going to just put a break. What if I don't have a break here? I might also get the same result. It depends on I might get the same result in this case. But let's say if there's a redundancy. So for example, if I have 1, 1 here, so I will see the common elements. Let's say now I change this to 1. If you notice, I will see it for 2 times, right? Yeah, you'll see it for 2 times. But it would not be the case if I just put in a break, okay? Yeah, I will see 2 times, okay? So I think that's it for this video. We're going to continue question 5 up until question 7 in the next video. Thank you very much.